All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Igjot, and welcome to session 2 of Android Study Jams 2021. Today, we will be building an application in Kotlin, and it'll be a very basic application just to get you started, and so that you have a basic idea of how an application is structured and how you should go about, starting building an application. So that's what we will be doing today. Let me share my screen, and during the course, during the course of today's meeting, if you have any doubts, you can unmute yourself and ask, or if you didn't understand something, you can, ask right away because we don't have too many people in the meeting. So yeah, let's get started. Today, what we will be building is a calculator application. So I'm sure you've used calculator applications in your mobile phones like Android, iOS. You must have used calculators. So we will be building a very basic calculator today using Kotlin. And I have already coded it up. So I will share the link with you so that you can follow along. And we will be doing it from scratch again. So let me share the link with you on the Meet chat. Yeah. So, okay, cool. I think I have shared the link in the Meet chat. You can go over there and look at the code, and we will be building the application today. So just so that you have an idea of what the application will look like, let me try and show it to you right now. So this is what our application will look like in the end. It'll be, a bunch of numbers here, along with the decimal point, a delete option equal to, and a bunch of operators along with a clear button over here. So you can type in different stuff, perform operations like this and get the result over here. Yeah, so that's the idea for today. And all right, so let's go ahead and start building. I hope that you've set up. I had mentioned a link over there in the spam message that we rolled out that you should have completed by now. But even if you haven't, that's fine. We will. You can just follow along later with the recording, and you can just pay attention right now. So yeah, what I want you to do is, if you're doing it along, then open our Android Studio and create a new project. So you go to File and press New Project. This window will open up. So what this allows you to do is to create an application for a bunch of things. Like you can create it for your phone and tablet, or you can create it for your wearable devices like your smart watches, etc. You can create it for the Android TV, and you can create it for the automotives like your car, etc. So we will be building it for a phone, obviously, and we will be using the empty activity. These are just templates that you can use. So if you want already some code of it set up, then you can select it. For us, we will be using an empty activity because we don't need anything. We just need a blank screen to show up when we open the app, and we will start coding from there. So we press next. It'll ask you for the name of the application, and just put up a name like calculator or calc. I'll put up calc because I already have a calculator. Yeah, so you can do this. Actually, I'll just name it calculator. Doesn't matter. Yeah, we'll name it calculator. These are some options that you have. This is a package name that should be unique to your application. Not right now. This is fine for now. This is the location where your code will be present. This is the language. So you're going to be choosing between Java and Kotlin. We are doing Kotlin, so we will choose Kotlin. And minimum SDK is basically sort of like a threshold for what devices can actually use this application. So we will be using API 21. You can use whatever you want. Doesn't make a difference right now. But for the sake of consistency, let's go with 21. And yeah, it says that our application will run on 98% of devices today. So once all this is done, just press finish, and Android Studio will start creating that project for you with the name of calculator. So yeah, this is the new project window that will open up on its own. And I'll just go and close the other. Yeah. So we will be going over so this takes some time because it has to do some indexing and do some Gradle syncs and stuff. But before we actually start the coding process, I want you to look at the directory structure. So when you have your when you create your basic app, you have an app folder in which you have these three folders. One is a manifests folder, one is a Java folder, one is a res folder. So in the manifests folder, right now we have one file called Androidmanifest.xml. And this file is nothing but, if your application requires some permissions, like for example, sometimes your application needs location permissions or internet permissions. Like I don't know if you've noticed or not, when you download an application, sometimes it asks you if you want your app to, be able to get your location at a certain amount of time or during the course of the application. So those kind of permissions you can specify here. You can specify the icon type that you want. All that kind of stuff you can fill in here. That's the main purpose of this file. Inside your let's go to the res folder. We'll go to the Java folder later. The res folder contains these four folders. So the first is a drawable folder. We sometimes we need images in our application. So yeah, is there any doubt? All right, cool. So sometimes we need to add images to our application. So we will put them inside this folder. The layout folder contains the UI resources. So for now we just have one file called activity main.xml, and that is the default that's the default layout that you get when you create a new empty activity with Kotlin. And we will be modifying this a lot so that our app looks how we want it to look. Mipmap will contain your icon. So the app has an icon. So this will contain your app's icon image. And your values contains different stuff. So for example, here we have a colors.xml and a strings.xml. So in your application, you might need to access some colors. You can specify your own colors. So you may not just use the default colors that the material theme allows you to use, but certain hash values and everything like that, you can specify that as a variable so that you don't have to put the hash value again and again. So if you don't know what a hash value is, it's just like a a 6-character alphanumeric thing, which I'm not sure if it's alphanumeric, but it's like a 6-character string which uniquely identifies a particular color. So you can give it a name and you don't have to keep putting that hash value again and again, because it's kind of tough to remember, right? So if you just open this up, you can see that these kind of hash values can be given some names. So this hash FFBB86FC is given purple_200. And if you want to use this hash value, you can just call it purple_200, and it will understand that you want this hash value from here. Similarly, strings.xml will contain some of the string resources in your app. We will see what this means later. But for now, if you just want to show some string on your screen that will never change, those kind of static strings, you can give it a name like an app_name, so that you don't have to keep typing calculator again and again. You can just say app_name, and you will get the actual string value in that place. So we will be using this value folder as well today. And once this is done, all right, so this Gradle Scripts folder contains some of the scripts that you will require. We will be using one of these as well. It basically, sometimes you want to use dependencies. So for example, people have written some code on their own, and you don't want to, keep writing code for everything. So sometimes what makes a job easier is to use packages and libraries that others have already written and use them in your code, so that you don't have to write that code again and again. And for today's calculator application, we will be using a particular dependency, which we will look into later. All right, so now coming to the main part, this is a Java folder, which contains most of your logic. This is where you'll actually put all of your application code. And these other two folders which you have, this is an Android test and test folder. These are for your instrumentation tests and normal unit tests that you write for your application. We won't worry about that too much for now, because it's not so important in today's session, but we'll be talking about them later. So this is the main file. When you run your application, this is what is run first. Just to give you an overview of what this means, this is a Kotlin file. So .kt is a Kotlin extension. This is a package. So the name of the package is com.example.calculator. Sometimes what you want to do is when you have a large app, you have a lot of stuff that you want to write. So there's a lot of code that you want to write. So putting that all inside this one folder or one package is not very ideal. So what you do is you divide that into multiple folders, and you basically divide your code based on what it's trying to do. And you put that into different packages. So that's what a package is. So here we have this example.calculator, which is a default package that you get when you create a new application. These are some of the import statements for some of the boilerplate code that we have over here. And we need them for writing this class, which is the main activity class. So the main activity is what is run when you create your when you run your application. And this function, I don't know if you remember, last session, I might have mentioned that fun is a keyword, which tells that it's a function to Kotlin. So this is actually a function that, Kotlin allows you to use that you're creating so that Kotlin can understand that it's a function. So what this function onCreate does is that whatever you write inside this function will be, implemented when the app runs itself for the first time. So not for the first time, like whenever you open the app, this code will be run. So a lot of our code will go inside this onCreate. We'll talk about that later. So I think now you have a basic idea of what our directory structure is. Activity_main.xml is basically your layout file, as I said. So your UI is what you will specify in here. Right now, what we have is a simple screen which has hello world written in the middle. It's very tough to see because it's very small, but that's what it is. And when we run our app, you will just get a screen with hello world written in the middle. Just to give you an idea, you have three options here. One is a code option, one is a split option, and one is a design option. So this is currently in the split mode. So you can see the design part of it as well, along with the code. So whenever you modify the code, you can see the design changes that happen accordingly. So let me just zoom in here a little bit. As you can see, it's hello world. So this is where the hello world is actually being specified in our code. So if we change this, you will see the change over here as well. So let me just put something like hello, and you can see that it changed over here. So it actually helps a lot in, doing it before you run your application, because running your application is not, again and again, is not a very fun thing to do because you have to wait for a few seconds. So it just shows you what it's going to be like even before you run the application. So that's one good thing. So these three tabs allow you to change your layout however you want to. So if you have your code, you can only see the code, which is the XML code. If you have split, you can see both of them together. And if you have design, you can only see the design part of it. So what we should do now is just run the application first, because this does take some time to run. That is only in the first time. When you run it again, it'll be much faster because a lot of the builds have happened, and you don't need to worry about it. So this is our old application. Actually, let's just close that. And so this application will run. You can see what's happening inside this build thing over here. So when you run your application, you can actually see what all tasks are happening. And for now, it's just building a lot of stuff. And so while we wait, I'll just give you a brief overview of how we will be changing our UI. So this is the screen which we have with us, and to modify the screen, we have a lot of options with us. So there are multiple layouts that you can use. There are multiple widgets that you can use, like a text widget, some buttons, switches, etc. You can just drag and drop it on the screen, and that makes your job very easy. For example, if you want to drop a button right below this hello, you can put it here, and you see it's just as simple as dragging and dropping, and it'll be available to your application. So there are a lot of things to talk about on the screen as well, but we'll do that a little later. Let's just see the result of what we have run. Yeah, so as you can see, our application ran, and you can see hello in the middle over here. All right, great. So we have a basic application up and running. Now, what we want to do is we want to create the layout of our application first. So I'm not sure if you remember what it was like, but let me just get an image here. One second. We will be trying to duplicate certain, the calculator that I built, and the code, as I already said, is shared on GitHub. So if you want the link to that, it's in the chat box. And yeah, so let me just put it in the chat as well. Yeah, so if you can see in the chat, this is what we're trying to duplicate. This image is what we're trying to be, creating in our application. So for that, first, let us remove this hello from the middle here, because we don't want that. So we'll just press delete and it'll vanish. And as you can see in this image, we want to first, have, if you're looking at the image that I put in the chat, you can see that we have two text fields up first. We'll be only using one text field because we, type in some text and we show the result after you press is equal to. So we will use only one text field. So that text field can be actually, it's actually called a text view in Kotlin, in this Android Studio. So we will be putting a text view over here. And what this requires are certain constraints. All right, so we will not be using a constraint layout. I'll explain what a constraint layout is right now. All right, so by default, when you start an application, you get a constraint layout, which means that for every element that you put in your screen, you require to specify some constraints. And what that means is that suppose I put a text field up here, right? This text view is actually, the position is not specified. So it's just arbitrarily placed somewhere. And that's not good for your application, because on different screens that can cause some errors. So what a constraint layout wants is it wants to know that where is it going to start and where is it going to end. So for example, if we are creating a constraint layout, we have to say that it's going to be at the top of the screen here, and the left side of the screen. So, those are some of the constraints that you have to mention when you are using constraint layout. But we are not using constraint layout because it's a lot of work. Plus, we need to build a grid sort of a thing. So we will be actually using something called a linear layout, and that is basically, if you worked with some other frameworks like Flutter or React Native, you must know about rows and columns. So we don't have rows and columns per se in Android, but we have something called linear layout, which can be horizontal and vertical. So you can specify whether you want a linear, whether you want a horizontal or vertical linear layout, and you can put some elements inside that linear layout. So whatever the elements you put inside, for example, if you have a vertical linear layout, if you put elements inside the vertical linear layout, they will be, stacked vertically, one below another. And if you, do something else, like if you have a horizontal linear layout, then they will be to the right of each other. So one element will be here, one element will be here, and you have multiple elements in a horizontal row. So, all right, that's fine. Now, yeah, so we will remove this constraint layout from here, and we will change it with a linear layout, because that's what we want. So a linear layout. And for our linear layout, we will have some height and width specified. So you have a few options for your height and width. You can have a match parent option, which basically means that the parent of this particular element, linear layout, which is basically the entire screen. So we'll be matching our width with the parent's width. So in that case, basically the entire screen's width and the entire screen's height is going to be the linear layout's width and height. Yeah, so our linear layout is ready. We want it to be vertical, right? So we have to specify the orientation here. The orientation is basically, specifying whether you want it to be vertical or horizontal. So orientation is equal to vertical. So that's good. And all right, so we can now, once we have a linear layout, we can put stuff inside of it. So I'll just remove this for now, and I'll get a text view. So our text view is going to be, okay, so let me just explain this component tree also once. This component tree is very useful because it, allows you to see the nesting of the layers. So what that means is a linear layout will have some children, right? So a linear layout can have like a text view as its child. So you can put it right here. And that means that text view is the child of a linear layout. That's one thing that we have. You can have another linear layout actually as a, child of the main linear layout that we have here. So if I bring it here, you can see that a linear layout was actually the child of the main linear layout that we have. And you can put other stuff inside this nested linear layout as well, like a text view. So it basically just helps you, figure out the nesting of all the elements that you have in your application and your layout. And it's very useful in that sense. So for now, I'm going to remove it. Let's just, okay, so we need the text view because that's what's going to be having our result when we use the calculator. So this will be showing the result. And what's very important here is that we specify an ID for our text view because when we write the logic for our code, um, basically we need to make sure that we can reference to this text view so that we can change its value. The main reason that we're using this text view is so that we can actually, modify what it shows later on when our code is working. So I'll change it to be, let's say, calc exp. So calculator expression will be the ID of our text view. And once that is done, our text view is ready. And this text is basically what's going to be displayed inside our text view. When we start the app, we want nothing to be shown there, so we'll keep it empty for now. So once this is done, we need to start building our, our actual calculator's keys. So we have multiple rows that you can see in that photo, which I sent. We have the first row, which contains two buttons, clear and slash. And that is basically for, clearing the expression that we have now and for the divide operation. So let's create a linear layout for that as well. Yeah, so we will create a linear layout and we will put it here. And it has to be a horizontal linear layout because, uh, you know, uh, we need to put stuff in a horizontal fashion right there. So, all right, we have a linear layout over here, which is horizontal as shown here. And we want to put two buttons inside it. Actually, let it just be text view because we can anyways change that later on. So we have two text views in here. Both of these text views should have different values that they are showing. So first one should show clear, and the second one should show slash. So that is great. And this ID, again, we should change so that we can reference it in our code. So let's just call it button clear. And we'll call this button divide. All right, so that's great. Now we want a bunch more of these linear layouts. So we need 4 more rows for our grid, and we will be pasting that here. But instead of doing this manually right now in front of you, I think it would be more efficient if we just saw the code and then used it in our application because we don't have as much time for coding the entire thing ourselves right now. So yeah, so basically what we have is a linear layout with a text view, which will be the calculator expression, which is basically the top thing, which we, the top part which shows the actual result of your calculator. You have linear layout after that, which contains, okay, so we have a linear layout which is vertical after that. And that vertical linear layout will basically contain multiple other linear layouts, which will be the rows. So you have the first row, which has only 2 of text views, as we showed earlier. So the first one is a clear text view, and the second one is a divide text view. Um, Now that row is complete right now, right? So the linear layout has been closed over here, / linear layout. Now you have the next linear layout, which is basically the next row, which contains 4 buttons or 4 text views. So the first text view will be showing the number 7. The second one will show the number 8. The third one will show the number 9, and the fourth one will show the multiplying operation. So, I'll just bring this image so that it's easier for everyone to see. Yeah. So this is what we are trying to show here. The 7, 8, 9, and star. This is the second row which we want inside our linear layout. So you can see that these are the 4 text views that are handling that. Then we have another row which has 4, 5, 6, and subtract. That's this row. And the linear layout is closed after that. Then we have another row which contains 1, 2, 3, and plus. And then we have another row which contains the decimal point, 0, delete, and equals. So this is the basic structure of our UI, which we have here. Now, there are certain things which you might not have understood, which is basically like a lot of the stuff over here. So these are just properties of a particular element. So in this case, let's just go over some of them right now. The ID is pretty straightforward. I've explained that before. Layout width and layout height is basically this element. We are trying to specify what is going to be its width and height. So in this case, it's wrap content. What wrap content means is that it should just be able to, wrap whatever we are putting inside it without having to, without cutting out any of the part that's inside it. So if you are displaying this 89 plus 53 plus 100, this should be shown completely without any cuts. And that should be the height of our element. Now, similarly for width, it should be enough to wrap this content. So basically from here till here, and the height should be from here till here. That's what this basically means. Now we are specifying height here, which is actually not very ideal. This should not be done. We'll remove this in the next commit. There's a padding. So now for a padding, what it basically means is that you don't want everything to stick to the screen, right? So if this 89 was just very near to this calculator, it would not look very good. So you want some space to be there between calculator and this number, this expression over here. So that's what padding does. It provides some space around the element so that it doesn't look very, clumsy over there on the screen. The text is basically initially, we don't want anything to be shown over there. So the text is going to be blank. So when we start the app, this is going to have nothing in it. And these are the layout constraints. So it's just telling that this element will start right at the start of its parent. So its parent is the entire screen. No, its parent is the linear layout. So it will start when the linear layout starts. And its top part will be at the top of its parent. So again, it's basically sticking the top and the left side of its parent. That's what this means. Similarly, you have a bunch of these attributes, which you can actually go through in the Kotlin documentation. And as you go through the course, which I have provided in the spam message, you will you'll start understanding what these things mean over here. So for now, what's important is this ID and the text. So actually, I was explaining the strings.xml earlier, right? In the calculator over here, when we went to values, we had a strings.xml. So this is where actually that's going to be used. This you can see, right? This @string / divide op. This is basically a string that will contain the divide operation, and it's given the name of divide op so that you don't have to keep putting / again and again. You can just put divide op and not worry about what the value is going to be. So, and if you have to change, suppose the value everywhere, then instead of changing it everywhere inside your code, you can just go to your strings.xml and change it over there once, and that change will be reflected throughout your application. So that is what we have here. So this @string is going to go inside your strings.xml and start looking for something called divide op and put that over here instead of it. So that's what this basically means. And the style is also basically just some extra attributes. So you see this text view, right? This text view has only 3 attributes, but we want it to look proper. So we want it to look like this. if we don't specify any attributes, it will not look like this. It will just look very plain vanilla, and we don't want that, right? So we specify a style for our text view, and that style is inside a file called styles.xml, which I'll just show you in a second. We have this styles.xml. Layout values, yeah, style.xml, yeah. So we have it inside the values folder. So yeah, these are the basic styles that we have. So for different elements, we want different styles. Like for example, this has a different style from this, and this has a different style from this. So we want to have that kind of differentiation between different elements.
Hello. Hello. I think you are not audible. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Is he
Yeah, he's
audible?
not audible, right? No, he's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
audible.
he's not audible.
Yeah.
And we use it over there.
Yeah. Now it's fine.
All right. Am I audible? Can someone?
Yeah, you are
Yeah,
not
you're
audible.
audible now.
Now you are audible. Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay, so yeah, that's basically what our style.xml is doing. Now let's just go back to our activity underscore main.xml. And I hope you understood what this is trying to do. It's just, sort of creating that layout for your application. And it's very similar to HTML, actually. Both are markup languages, which just help you, in specifying how your layout should look like. And if you think about it, your styles.xml is a lot like your CSS file. So it's just trying to, put your style into one file so that you don't have to write it inside your HTML file. All right, so we'll create our styles.xml file here because it's not there by default. You go to your values and you right click and say a new file, and you select new resource file and you name it styles, and you press OK. So once that is done, it gives you a starting code over here. And since we don't want to code out everything right now, we'll just take that as well. So values styles XML, and yeah, let's just bring that back and put it here. Right. So now you can see that there are some problems, right? Like these red squiggly lines. They are coming because we have actually defined some colors in our application over here, which I have pushed, which are not actually there in our current application. So in our colors.xml, you can't see something called equal button color or something like that, no? But we are trying to access that over here. So yeah, so you see equal button. There's no color called equal button in our colors.xml. So we need to bring colors.xml values also from our previous application, which I've shown on GitHub. And we need to bring strings.xml as well, because that has a lot of resources over there. So let's do that as well. In strings.xml, you'll see a lot of resources. So again, just to let you know, this divide op, for example, is going to be replaced by / wherever it's used. Underscore 8 is going to be replaced by 8 wherever it's used. And you may be wondering what the point is right now, but Android Studio, first of all, gives you a warning if you're using hard-coded strings anywhere in your program. And also, when you write larger applications, it just makes more sense to have it extracted into a particular file like this so that you can keep reusing it and not having to type it again and again. So yeah, that's our strings.xml. And we'll just bring our colors as well, because this is just UI stuff. We don't care about it too much. Yeah. Let's bring it to our colors.xml. Right. So I think we have everything we need now. We have our activity_main.xml. We have our style.xml. We have our colors.xml and strings.xml. Once again, just to recap, since it's a lot to take in, we specify our main layout over here in activity_main. We have different styles that we can use. So for example, these buttons 7, 8, 9, 6, 5, 4, they are different. They have their own style. And since you don't want to repeat all of that style code again and again, we extract that into a styles.xml file. And for example, number
Hello, you're not audible.
Okay, am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible now.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting a few calls on my phone right now. Yeah, so, all right, so we have this, as I was saying, we have a number button style, which has a lot of properties defined to it. And we're basically using that for our numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, so on till 9. And we don't have to repeat that code again and again. And just to show it to you, we have this number button style here, and we're using that in our numbers. So let's just go to 7. And you can see that the style we're using is number button style. And that's great. So whenever you're trying to use one of your resource files like styles.xml, colors.xml, you specify it using an @ symbol. So if you're using styles, you say @style / whichever style you want to use. Similarly, if you're using color, for example, over here we have @color. You're basically trying to use your colors.xml file. So we get our stuff like this by specifying the name along with the @ sign in front of it. So yeah, we have our basic UI over here. And let's just rerun our app so that we don't, let's just see if it works as expected. And if there's any problem, just a photo. Let's wait. Okay, I think the app has to run again. Okay, I think there is some problem with the cache, so I'll just delete the calculator application for now. Install. Okay. Let me try running it again. So it says the build has succeeded, and there's some sort of an issue. Okay, let's look at our main activity. Side our cat. Okay.
There are some errors under run actually.
Right. Okay. So it says unable to start activity. Binary XML file. Counter example.calculator. Okay. Then creating class layout. Okay. Let me see. Okay, I got what the error is. So we're using layout over here, which is not what we should be doing right now. Because so the reason why I use layout in my activity_main.xml was because we need this layout tag if we want to use something called binding, and binding makes our job very much simpler when we want to access the elements of our UI page. So that's why I use layout in my code. But since we are not doing binding as of now, which we will be doing actually later, so we should not have this layout right now. So I'll bring this boilerplate stuff down here, and I'll remove the layout tag, and that should hopefully fix the problem. Let's just run it again and see if it works. Should be fine, right? And yeah, it worked. So I'll just show you the app. And yeah, the UI is ready. It does not do anything right now, but the basic layout for our application is now uh, available, as you can see. And basically, it took nothing. The activity main just had to be changed a little bit. So we'll put that layout in later. But for now, I think this is a good place to start. So that issue was happening because I was using binding, as I said. And when so binding is basically something that you use when you want to access a particular UI element. For example, in our app, if I wanted to access, suppose this 9, this button 9, then I would do that using its ID. But first, I need to fetch this button by using its ID, and then I will perform some operation on it. Like, for example, in this case, I will set an on-click listener, which basically means that we are waiting for the user to click this, and we'll do something based on that. So that is basically 2 lines of code for each of these buttons that we have here. And that's not cool, right? So we need to fix that by using binding, and that just gives you an object that you can use. So you can just do binding dot and use any ID. So if this has an ID of _9, you can do binding dot _9, and then you can do any function that you want on this particular UI element. So you can set a listener on this. You can change the values, do whatever you want on this particular um, element. So that's what binding is. And to do that, first we need to go inside our Gradle file, not this one. So we have 2 Gradle files. One is the project level, one is the module level. But we want to go inside our the module level build Gradle file, and inside this we want to enable data binding. So for that we need something called data binding is enabled, right? So data binding dot enabled is equal to true. So this basically means that we want to allow binding in our application. So when I say sync now, it'll basically read this file again, see what the changes were, and based on that, it'll generate whatever class we might need for this. So we need the binding class right now. So it'll be creating that. Once that is done, then we can go inside our main activity. And over here, we can actually initialize our binding object. So how we're going to do that is by a method, which I'll show you just now, a second. And our main calculator, this. So yeah, so basically we have to create that by something called, so we know how to create variables, right? Val something will basically create a variable of that name. So we'll call it binding over here. And it's of the type of activity main binding. And that's basically just the type that we'll be using for the binding variable, and data binding util. So this is the actual, this is the class that is generated when we do that data binding enabled true in our build Gradle. And this is generated. So we have a bunch of options that we can use on this. So there's a set content view, which basically does over here whatever this is doing, it'll do and create the binding object for us. So the set content view is basically something that it tells key, I want to show this layout first. So this r.layout.activity underscore main is going to go to your activity underscore main.xml and render that on your screen. So that's how actually we are setting the content view when the application runs, and that's on the onCreate method. So we will just copy this and put it inside our set content view. Comma, okay, sorry, it's this comma set this activity main. And once this is done, we need to import it actually. And once that is done, then it should be okay. Yeah. Okay, there is some issue. Set content view. Okay. The main binding. Okay. So there is, so it's not able to find this file because it's not generated apparently. And to fix that, we need to do something. I actually encountered this error before. And to fix it, I had to, yeah, so this is actually what I was talking about. So for fixing this, we need to put the layout over there because that is what the application needs. So we will put the layout tag back again, and we will specify these properties there so that we don't need to worry about that later, and slash layout at the end. So the things that I copy pasted just now, that's just for specifying the root element of our layout. So this layout tag is actually the root element of our current UI. So that's why we have specified that over here. And once that is done, then I think this issue should not be there anymore. And yeah, so now this issue is gone once we have imported our file. All right, so our binding value is ready. And just to give you an idea of how this would work is, let's just take a example. So binding dot, this shows you all of your IDs. So we have a bunch of IDs here. Add, divide, equals, all of these are buttons that we have in our application, right? So this is called Calc 7, this is called Calc 8, Calc 9. This is divide, this is multiply, subtract, and add. So we can take any of these buttons. For example, over here, I take binding dot multiply, and we can change something. So we'll just set text, and we'll put it as multiply. So what this should do is when we run the application, it should, instead of this star, it should change the text to multiply. The word multiply should come over here. So when we run our application again, let's just see what happens. Yeah, let's just see. It won't take too much time. And this is just for testing what would happen in case something like this happened. Let's see. Right. Okay, it's built. And yeah, as you can see, it changed to multiply. So from the star character, it changed to this string. And that was done because we did this inside the onCreate function. So when the app ran, it changed the text value of our text view. So that is good. So now what we want to do is for each of these buttons, we want to set click listeners, which basically means that whenever you click one of these buttons, some action should happen. So let's just do that for now. I'll remove this because it's not required right now. So for all of these buttons, right, we want to have click listeners for each of them. Again, we should not code all of this right now because it'll take a lot of time. So I'll just bring the code over here. And yeah, so as you can see, we created this binding object, and then we set on click listeners for each of the buttons inside our layout. So we have calc 0, calc 1, calc 2, all the way up until all the divide, multiply operations. And once they're pressed, something should happen, right? So this dot set on click listener is followed by curly braces. And what is inside the curly braces is what will actually happen when that button is clicked. So here we have something called evaluate expression. And that is just a function that we have created. And that should only, that should do something based on which button was clicked. So we send 0, 1, 2, 3 based on which button was clicked. And that function which we have, evaluate expression over here, will do something based on each of these options. So if it's a number, there's a is number option over here. So if it's a number, then it'll just add it to our expression and move forward. And if it's not a button, if it's something else, then if it's not a number, then if suppose it's a multiply divide operation, again it'll do that. And if it's suppose an equal to sign, then it'll evaluate the expression and change the value on the screen. So that's what we are doing here. Let's just copy out this part of the code and yeah, copy it out and paste it here. So our on-click listeners are ready. but this function that we have, evaluate expression, is not defined yet. So let's just do that also. Fun is the keyword to define a particular expression. We call it evaluate expression, and it takes in some parameters, and we do some stuff. And it's going to be taking in a few parameters. So first thing it's going to be taking is which key was pressed. So val pressed, and it'll be of the type string. So this, then we have our binding, which is basically to perform some operation on our UI. We need this binding object as well. So we'll be having this binding over here, and that'll be of the type activity main binding. And then we have Boolean, which is basically if it's a number or not. So val is number, and it'll be a Boolean. So we've got those. Okay, apparently, okay, so we don't need val here because we're just defining the parameters. That's fine. So whenever something happens, we should, run this and check what we should do. So we have multiple cases here, right? If we press numbers, it should just keep getting added on the screen. If we press delete, the last thing should be removed from the expression. If we press clear, everything should be removed from the expression. If we press equal to, we have to, see what the result is. So we'll write a lot of if-else statements and put them inside this. But again, instead of doing that, let's just look at the code here and see what we are doing. So if the number that was pressed is actually a number, if the button pressed is a number, or if it was a decimal, then what we do is we just add it to our expression. So we go to our expression text view, and we set the text to whatever was there before this plus the pressed string. So the pressed string is going to be, in this case, suppose we press 0. So the pressed string will be 0, and the 0 will be added to whatever the expression was before this. For example, it was 144.5. If we press 0, it will become 144.50, and that's what we're doing here. In the case that it was a delete, we just change the text to be the expression without the last character that was there in the expression. In case we pressed clear, then we remove everything. So we change the text to be equal to an empty string. If it was an equal to sign, then we do some operations. And if it was not neither of them, then it basically means that it was something which we don't even care about. So we just add it to our expression, so without any issues over there. So this is our evaluate expression. It might take some more time to go through all of this code. So what we'll do is we'll keep this for the next session because we've already exceeded an hour. And what I want you to do is go over the code, which I have shared with you, and try to implement it on your machine. So in the next session, we will actually go over the code and actually implement it on the app and finish running this app, and then move on to some other topic. So I think that is pretty much it for today. If there are any doubts, you can ask me right now, and we can clear them up. If not, then we're done.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mahadev, I can hear you.
Yeah. I didn't get the difference between the linear layout and the constraint layout.
Sure, I'll explain it to you. So basically, the linear layout is basically going to be something like a row. So a row is basically like a bunch of different elements put together, right? So you have two buttons over here, clear and slash. So they're put together in a horizontal fashion. So that's something which you want to do. But in a constraint layout, whenever you put an element, you need to specify what constraints it has. So for example, you should put that it should be below this element, or it should be after a particular other element, so that it's simpler for the phones to realize, or the actual the parser to realize that you're trying to put this element in this exact position based on your screen size. So it doesn't need to change for different phones. It will stay the same. That's what constraint layout does. It just basically specifies a lot of constraints so that your app will run without any overflows and render errors.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anything else from anyone? If you have any doubts, you can ask me, and I'll be happy to clear it. Yeah, correct. It is easy to use constraint layout. You don't even need to do that, right? You can change vertical bias. That's right. It's very simple actually. If you go in the design tab, if you have a constraint layout, you can specify the constraints by just dragging a particular element's constraint to a particular place. So if you want this to be under this, you can just drag the top of this element to the bottom of this element, and it'll be done. So a constraint layout is actually very simple. I did not use it in this application for some reason, but yeah, in general, it is easy to use constraint layout. Yeah. I've not used constraint layout in the current code, so I'm not sure what you mean, but yeah, if you would like to elaborate a little bit, you can unmute yourself and we can talk.